Hey everyone, and welcome to Thrillomine Fabric Frenzy, your monthly source of news and spotlights, deep dives, and more around Microsoft Fabric and Power BI. I've been looking so much forward to presenting for you today because we have some interesting topics on the agenda. As usual, we have a spotlight, and this week that spotlight will be on the new Direct Lake, a new storage mode for Power BI that is really neat and works together with Microsoft Fabric. So for anyone here who's missed the news of what is Microsoft Fabric, Fabric is the new Microsoft data platform embracing all the different workloads we already know and love from Azure Synapse Analytics, from Azure Data Factory, and from Power BI, even with a completely new workload, also including the new Data Activator. So a common experience to work with everything we do around data. Microsoft Fabric is part of the platform and the UI we already are used to with Power BI, and it's just an easy way to get started with your entire data stack end to end. So, for the news, it is September. We have some new releases, and we recently had a Power BI Next Step conference here in Copenhagen. And during that conference, we had a visit from Microsoft, from Mo, who is a principal program manager there, who announced and revealed some very exciting new things that will come in the near future. So before we talk about those, we also got some news that are already here. We got SQL project support for Fabric warehouses. We got the new workspace tables that are part of these to come features. Then we have calculation groups for desktop, upgrades to the Direct Lake, and finally a North Star, a direction for visualizations. So a lot of interesting things, features that you can go in and play with today, but also features that we still have to wait a bit more to use in the near future. Let's start with SQL projects for the Fabric Warehouse. With the SQL projects, you'll be able to do more source control integration. So you can treat your database code as real code that can be stored in versioning control, for example, like Git. You can use the SQL database projects to keep track of changes, make code reviews, and maintain a version history of that code. And finally, run testing, schema validation, and deploy using SQL projects. So it's really a way to make your whole DevOps and CI/CD around your databases a bit more robust and a bit more version controllable. So a very nice addition. All in all, it's available to use already today. It works with SSDT and it works with Azure Data Studio. Yeah, so definitely recommend checking that out. Then we got one of the reveals at Next Step. We are going to have, it's something people have been asking for a long time, workspace folders. So it's not here yet, unfortunately. I mean, I would love that. I think we've been asking for this in the community for 5, 6, maybe even more years. And it seems like it's getting very close to finally being here. For me, this is a feature that I would be able to use immediately. I mean, I would go today and use this feature to just organize my Power BI workspaces or my Microsoft Fabric workspaces. When we have the feature, it seems like it's going to be part of clicking that new button will allow us to create new folders. Officially, they seem to be called subfolders, and it is confirmed that they do support nesting, so we can create folders within folders and create an actual folder structure. It seems like a small thing, and it seems like almost too much to celebrate such a basic functionality, but not having had this functionality for so many years, it really excites me that we can finally start making true organization in our workspaces. So I hope someone out there is as excited as I am about this, because it will be huge. Then we have calculation groups. So calculation groups is a feature that actually have been in Power BI for quite some time. It allows us to streamline our measures, and it makes our reporting more flexible. The new thing is that calculation groups will be in desktop. But more on that. Let's just make a quick introduction to calculation groups for anyone who doesn't know about them yet. So let's imagine that we have a bunch of measures in our data set. In this example, it would be something like sales amount, sales cost, sales discount, and margin. And once we have all those metrics, we probably are going to want to do some sort of time intelligence analysis on them. We want to look at sales amount, but we also want to look at sales amount last year and compare those two. Maybe we also want to see sales amount year to date and watch that how it progress over time. And it could be even more. So if we wanted to do this, as you can see on the slide, we would have to today to create not only the 4 measures, but also create 4 new measures for each of these time intelligence, summing up to already 16 different measures. Now imagine if it's not 4 metrics, but 10 or 20, and it's not just 3 time intelligence dimensions, but maybe also 10. We would quickly have to maintain and develop on 200 or more measures. Very, very quickly becomes too much. Calculation groups helps with that. So imagine if we could just create our measures, our metrics, as what is called calculating items. So a flexible way where we can pick and choose between them. And we could do the same for our time intelligence and set it up in a way that they actually can mix and match. This is exactly what we can do with calculation groups. It allows us to create this kind of template where we can, with only two calculation groups, we can mix and match between all the elements within them. So it becomes much simpler. We only have to care in this case about 7 different objects. And once we do our reporting, we just pick which kind of time intelligence analysis we want to do. We pick which kind of metrics we want to analyze, and adding those two together, we get the exact number we want. So no more having to maintain 200 different measures. Really cool. But this is not new. We've had this for a long time, actually. We've just had to rely on using third-party tools to go into the data model and configure these calculations groups. So we've been able to do this for a long time. It's just been, well, complex. The new thing is that we have been revealed that there will be calculation groups in the Power BI desktop UI in the near future. We don't know much more yet, but as the image here shows from Next Step, it is part of what is being built and definitely on the roadmap. So we're starting to see some cool things here. So calculation groups, very neat. And if you didn't know about calculation groups yet, definitely worth using in your data sets and reporting. It really streamlines things. Then we also have some news on the data visualization front. So back in the days, if you wanted to create some sort of chart visual like this, we would have to use so many elements. We would have to use a bunch of shapes for the square and the square to the side, as well as the icons and the actual measures, and it just became a lot of elements. With the new card measure, we can do all this with only one visualization. So it's going to make things simpler, but it's also going to speed things up reporting-wise. It's not going to take a drain on your report rendering in the same degree that it's doing before. So we get this new card visual, which is already available now, and it's still being developed, and more features will be added to this visual. Then we also got the news that there will be a new button slicer released in October. So looking very much forward to that. It seems to be giving us the options to make more clickable icon button-based slicers, similar to what we have with third-party visualizations like Chiclet Slicer, but again, simpler and more easy to work with. And finally, we were shown the north star of the data visualizations in Power BI. So some of the capabilities that we're looking into getting in the future. And there's a lot of here to unwrap, and I'm not going to go detail with all of them, but we already here see the power of the new button slices in the top, very clickable, sleek, great looking buttons. But we also have card visuals, as you can see on the left, with the trend lines and just many features. And there's a lot to dig into here. You can also see the line charts is also looking to get an upgrade with more options around formatting and well, just in general, the analytical capabilities of the visualizations. So we're looking into a future with many more capabilities to do much more with only native visualizations, which I personally look forward to. Third-party visualizations can be great, but they can also have a lot of limitations and add a bunch of extra work of having to maintain and govern who and how and what external visualizations we are allowed to and can use. So that was some of the news that we had. But we also have the Spotlight, which comes with its own set of news this time. So we're spotlighting here on Direct Lake, the new connection between OneLake and Power BI. And Direct Lake received two major news this month. The first one is that Direct Lake now supports calculation groups. That's nice, except that we don't have the option to use calculation groups in our desktop yet, so we cannot really use that feature yet. So that was a bit of a, okay, well, and yeah. The second thing we got was, and this is where things tie together, the second thing we got was XML endpoint support. So we can now edit our Direct Lake datasets with third-party tools like Tabular Editor. And in that way, we can also start adding calculation groups to the dataset. So we are actually able to do this, but it does come with a bunch of consequences, which I will talk a little bit about more in a few minutes. So let's talk about what is Direct Lake even. So in Power BI, we have different storage modes. We have the import mode. That's probably what most people are familiar with. It's the mode where you can refresh your data daily or hourly, and the data is copied from a source and stored inside your Power BI dataset. Could also be stored in a Power BI data flow, but yeah, import mode. So we also have direct query, where you establish a live connection to the data source, and then you just send query-sized data loads in real time. So if you connect to a SQL database, every time you update a visual, it will send a new query to that database and get a response. So much more live, but more slow in the reporting, and takes a larger strain on the source system. And then we have Dual, which is a hybrid between the import mode and direct query, allowing us to use one storage mode for some tables and combining it with another for some queries. And finally, composite models that enables us to use multiple storage mode, except for the new Direct Lake mode. Doesn't work with composite models. And finally, we have this new Direct Lake mode, which is a live connection to the OneLake. So it works like a real-time connection with direct query like speed, but it also has the performance of import mode. So we get the both worlds with Direct Lake. So we can actually use Direct Lake in our composite models, but it is going to fall back to direct query anyway. So be aware that if you ever use Direct Lake in any sense other than Direct Lake itself, it's going to just return to be similar to a direct query import mode. So direct query storage mode. So we have these three storage modes that all work on the Microsoft Fabric platform. We have import mode that can import the data from your lakehouse or your warehouse through the SQL endpoint. Technically, it can also connect to the files you have in your data lake or in your OneLake. But normally you would want to connect through the SQL endpoint. Then we also have direct query. It's just going to query that SQL endpoint. Again, can be connected to both the warehouse and the lakehouse. And finally, we have the direct lake, the best of both worlds, which can connect directly to those Delta tables, but currently it only works with the lakehouse object in Power BI. And how it works is that whenever you ask a query to your data set, you have a report, you update some numbers, you change a visualization, or you just want to refresh the elements on the page. It's going to send queries to the data model. This is what it does already today with import mode. But what happens with a direct lake connection is that is then going to send a request to the OneLake itself, and it's going to fetch the data from the lakehouse. And since the lakehouse already have this standardized Delta format with Parquet files, it can actually just very quickly cache those files and pull them into the memory engine of Power BI or of Direct Lake. And then you'll have that data very, very quickly available in a cached state where your report can be able to use them. But that also means the first time you're doing a query, it may take a bit of time because it is going to have to send the request to the lakehouse, pull in the data, store it in the memory cache, and then it'll be ready to be optimized for quick reads. But until then, you're going to have a delay that is somewhere between import mode and direct query. It's not going to be very long and sluggish, but it is going to take time. So just be aware that Direct Lake at its best is as fast as import mode, but at times can be slow for the user. In many ways, it is the best of both worlds, but there are also, of course, trade-offs and downsides. So let me show you a quick demo of how performant Direct Lake really is. So I have here a data set. And this data set I've reset, I've cleared the cache. It should be a clean slate. I would say live demo. Sometimes it acts not so, but let's try to test it out. So let's try to change one of the slices here and see how much time it will take to update the page. Something like this. And it starts updating. Takes a few seconds. This is not import level performance. This is actually closer to what we would see with direct query. And after 10-11 seconds, the page is updated. Not horrible, but not a nice experience for the end user. But let me just try again, because what happened now is that we sent this first signal. It went in, pulled the data from the lakehouse, and pulled it into the memory cache of the Direct Lake dataset itself. So it should be much faster here the second time around. Let's try. I'm just going to change the slicer again to a different value. Yeah. And it finished in half a second. So from having to spend 10-11 seconds on the first go, it is now actually optimized, read into memory, and it's ready to be used very fast. Question is then, what happens if I have to pull in a new column that I did not yet use? Well, let's try. So we can pull in something like, what's a location ID is already here. We'll just try to pull in this one. And I mean, it's only one column. It took a little bit of time because it probably wasn't in the memory. But if I update this again, it probably take less. And you see here, that column was now also loaded into memory. So with import mode, we're loading all our data into our data set in one time. But with Direct Lake, it's being done on an ad hoc basis. So whenever you do a query, it's going to hit those columns that you're using for the query and store them in memory. So they're ready to be fast the next time you use them. Which also means that the more columns are used, and that's not for a single user, it's for across your whole user base. The more a column is used in your dataset, the more frequently it will be in memory and be ready to be used again. So it's very flexible, very adaptive, and very much the best of both worlds. But let's say we want to test what is actually in memory now and what is not. For that, we can use DAX Studio and actually dig into the model and see what is a little bit of what is happening behind the scenes. Great. Connecting. And of course, I was logged out in the meantime here. Well, we will not see that today, but anyway, through DAX Studio, you should be able to query the DMVs, the system logs, the metadata tables, and that will show you the value of how much data you pull into the memory of the data model, as well as a so-called temperature. So there's an inbuilt function in the new Direct Lake datasets called temperature, which is helping determine which columns are used more frequently than others. And based on that, the columns are either kept in memory or being evicted if they're struggling if they're battling for the capacity of what you have available. Yeah. So that was Direct Lake. And as I said, we got XML report functionality for Direct Lake. So we can actually go now and create calculation groups there. We're starting to be able to do most of the things we can do in a standard data set. So that's cool. But be aware that if you ever go and actually use third-party tools to make any edits to your Direct Lake datasets, you will not be able to edit them anymore in the web modeling. So if you have business users who also needs to be able to make edits on your dataset, or you just yourself want to be able to make those edits in the Power BI service, don't run it through an external tool with the XML endpoint, because it is going to disable that option and you will be not able to go back to that point. It is kind of a point of no return. If you use the XML endpoint, you're forced to use it for all your changes going forward. So be aware of that. One last thing with Direct Lake is that Direct Lake also supports live update. So whenever you have new data, you can ask your Direct Lake to keep that data automatically updated in your dataset. So if you check out here in the service for a given dataset, under the settings, you have this option in refresh called keep your Direct Lake data up to date. And it will allow you to set it up so that whenever there's changes made to the data in OneLake, it's automatically going to push those changes to your Direct Lake tables in your dataset. And this is really cool because that means if I load in new data and I do this every 2 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that, that data is going to be immediately ready to be used in my datasets. So I don't have to think about refreshes. I don't have to think about refreshing every hour or every day. It's just going to be live updated. No such thing as a free lunch here either. So nothing comes for free, and this will also come with some consequences. So if you do enable this option, it is going to refresh your dataset every time new data is entered. And that's nice because that is what we want. But another thing that will happen is that every time our dataset is refreshed, it's also going to flush, which means delete the cached data we have inside the dataset. So all that effort we just did of sending some queries, using multiple columns, getting that dataset to load in those data and cache them, well, all that effort is then going to be reset. And we're back from scratch with a dataset that didn't load in any memory, and then that's going to be slow from the first go. So I can show you an example. If we go to this specific dataset, and we click the refresh button, because we can also do this manually, it's going to refresh. And since it's not an import mode, the refresh is only about updating the metadata and, well, deleting this cache. So now that I updated, we can go back to the same report, and we can try to change the slicer again to see what happens. And I just changed it, and we are, well, we're not back to the 10 seconds, which could be, yeah, that's due to the local report caching some of the visuals. So some of the visuals locally cached, but for some of them, well, it took now 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds. So it is getting slower again. And that will happen if you refresh. So deciding whether to refresh or to keep it fast and then control when you refresh is a new design choice we have to think about. The easy choice is, of course, just to let it fetch any updates. The problem with that is that you can have data where it's partially updated. Maybe you updated a dimension but didn't update your fact table yet, or the other way around. And if that happens, you may have some inconsistent data, and you may have even errors in your data. Whereas if you control when the refresh needs to happen, for example, after loading in all of your data, you can trigger an API to refresh the dataset. Well, then you have a bit more control, but the data may also be delayed for a few seconds. Finally, you can also just rely on the whole old practice of setting up an hourly or half-hourly refresh of your dataset, and then it'll manually go and update those data at those intervals. So you get some choices as how you want to tune this. And finally, you can also set up your own kind of engine or functionality to keep your dataset warm. So whenever you do a refresh, you could use a notebook or an API call or something that hits the data model, query the most used columns, and make sure that they're warm from the beginning, so that no user have to be the first user using the dataset and experience it being slow for the first time. So, well, depending on your report and depending on your dataset, you may want to spend this extra effort to give your users a more sleek experience, or you may choose not to. There's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of speed in this dataset. So what I forgot to mention is that, or what I didn't mention is that this report we've been looking at, this report that actually seems to be running pretty blazingly fast. So I can click around, and in any way it updates very close to what I would expect from an import mode report. This is actually a report with 900 millions of rows. So almost a billion data rows. And it's a 36 gigabyte large data model. So this is definitely not a small model that just runs fast because it was the convenient example to bring here. This is actually a very, very large data model. A data model where if we did use direct query, it would be going to take tens or 20 of seconds for updating every page. So when Microsoft say that we are getting something that is the best of both worlds, it has the import level performance, but it has the direct query speed, I am almost close to agreeing. So in most cases, it's going to be import level performance. In some cases, it's going to be a bit more slow. And in most cases, it's going to be direct query freshness. But that's only if you set up the auto update on the dataset. So yeah, we have full flexibility to configure some ideal state, the best trade-off between the two, but it's just not like we're getting, well, everything out of the box that just is the best and best and best. I mean, we get a very, very, very good trade-off here. So I'd agree, it's the best of both worlds. It's not like it's better than import mode or better than direct query, but it's the best compromise I've ever seen so far in Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. So thank you so much for listening in today. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed and saw some potential in Direct Lake, because it is it's definitely going to be part of the future of how we design datasets and how we set up our end-to-end data platforms in Microsoft Fabric and in Power BI. So, bye.